want you guys to hear it directly from me. I have sat down with the McNair family, and I have asked them for my release, and we have mutually agreed to part ways at this time. I came here 10 years ago as a kid from Wisconsin who'd never really been to Texas before, and now I can't imagine my life without Texas in it. You treated me like family, and I truly feel like you're my family. You guys have given me everything and more, and I can only hope that you feel like I've given you everything I have. The connection is special, and I will never ever take that for granted. I'm excited and looking forward to a new opportunity, but at the same time, it is always tough to move on. Thank you, Houston. I love you.
The big news of the day, JJ Watt leaving Houston. Just another in a long line of departures from the Texans right now. As we welcome you to NFL Live, we'll give you about 8 really intriguing destinations for Watt. And did you hear what the Texans front office said about Deshaun Watson today? That coming your way and so much more. You see him right there. Field Yates, Tim Hasselbeck, Marcus Spears here with you for an hour. Let's get right to it. The developing story is where we begin. JJ Watt released by the Texans today per his request. You saw some of that video from his Twitter account off the top of the show where Watt shared his news, and now one of the greatest to ever wear the Texans uniform will be on the move, looking for a new team, and it's safe to say a ring. Our Adam Schefter spoke with Cal McNair, the owner of the team. He had this to say, quote, change is going to happen. It's part of the NFL. It's inevitable, but not always easy. It's bittersweet. That's my word of today for JJ. We have gratitude for JJ. Giving him plenty of time to pick his next destination is the right move. This is doing right by him, and this gives him time to pick his next stop. Now, on Deshaun Watson, you see this here. He had this to say, there is a lot of misinformation out there. I'll leave it at that. Today, we want to focus on JJ. Deshaun is our QB. He is a Texan, and we expect him to remain a Texan. We will leave it at that. More on that coming. And listen, it's hard to keep track of all the Texans' departures. Hopefully this will help right here. Bill O'Brien started perhaps a chain reaction by trading DeAndre Hopkins last offseason. Then he was fired after an 0-4 start to 2020. And while football players come and go, it's tough to see the number of business side employees that were either fired or resigned, including team president Jamie Roots leaving his post on Wednesday. That's a long list of people, a long list of players. Marcus, you see those quotes, you see those names in the departures. What's your initial reaction?
My initial reaction is fundamental issues at the top, right? When we see these notable names that left, but also talking about the players. You had DeAndre Hopkins and JJ Watt added to that list, but Dwayne Brown left. That's 3 all-pro players from this Houston Texans organization. And whether you want to defend the decision-making on roster personnel and all of that, it has not worked. This team won 11 games and then 10 games and got into the playoffs. But the year previous to that, they were 4-12, and this past season, they were 4-12. So the decision makers have failed in this situation. And then for all of the people that talk about being disgruntled, look, JJ Watt knew it was time for him to get out of Houston. Let me tell you how things work with stars, with guys that have carried the mantle for your franchise. If they want to stay, you figure out a way to make them stay. I know he was due a lot of money, but outside of that, if JJ Watt had a vested interest and thought that the Houston Texans set up things the right way to go in the right direction, I firmly believe he would still be a Houston Texan today. We see what's going on with Deshaun Watson. We see Andre Johnson coming out and making his statements. Bottom line is this. This is not new. I know JJ is in his years. He's tenured and all of that. But he still can play at a very high level, and he just walked out of the door in Houston, and I plan on talking about this one day when their quarterback is traded somewhere else as well.
Listen, look, if he wanted to stay, I'm sure that they could have worked something out if he was willing to take less money. The fact of the matter is, Marcus, you know this, the market will demand a lot for J.J. Watt. He'll have plenty of opportunities. And so this was kind of a foregone conclusion. Listen, it does make sense at some level to tie these to some of the other departures, but this is different. He's a 32-year-old player who was due over $17 million, and it's been basically a full reboot in Houston. So I think this was actually, an opportunity for JJ to kind of, in some ways, do the team a favor by posting what he posted, saying, hey, listen, we mutually agreed to part ways, which is a way of saying they were going to cut him, and a way of him saying, look, and I'm fine with that because I'd rather go see what else is out there. And I get it. Like, you don't want to see great representatives of your franchise go somewhere else. But Emmitt Smith finished as a Cardinal. Jerry Rice bounced around the league. The reality is that this happens with older players, especially when there's a type of rebuild that's going on and a guy wants to chase being on a good team and winning a championship. That's what JJ's doing. I think it's actually best for both sides here.
Yeah, and it's simplest too, Tim. I'll get to that in just a moment. But Laura, I can't help but think that we should start this by acknowledging that JJ Watt's the greatest player in Houston Texans franchise history. Today should be a day of celebration about all that JJ brought to this team on the field. One of 3 players ever to be named a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. His efforts off the field, which included, of course, his incredible fundraising during Hurricane Harvey to rebuild a decimated city. Instead, because of everything that is going on, the lead hasn't been entirely buried, and we're having to discuss other factors as well. But from a pure business standpoint, this Texans team was looking in the mirror and seeing a cap situation that, with the likely reduced salary cap for 2021, was going to force them into some difficult decisions. By releasing JJ Watt, it clears $17.5 million of salary cap space off the books with one pen stroke. And now JJ on February 12th has the opportunity to use the next 5 weeks to sign with the team before other players that are scheduled to be free agents can even basically talk shop. So JJ could very well find a new home before other free agents even have the opportunity to talk to prospective teams that will be interested in their services.
And Field, coming up later in the show, we will give you some destinations that we think might make sense for JJ. You know, Marcus, the one thing that keeps coming to mind for me is that clip that we saw of JJ Watt walking off the field with Deshaun Watson after a game and saying, "We basically wasted a year of your career, and I'm sorry for that." When you think about JJ's perspective here, I understand the financial part of this is a piece, but is that in your mind really what's going on here?
Yeah, he identified how bad this roster was and how the moves have been made. And I totally disagree with Tim on the money situation. If JJ Watt wanted to stay in Houston, he would have restructured his deal and made sure he finished his career as a Houston Texan. If he saw that this organization was going in the right direction, JJ Watt is leaving because things are bad in Houston. He's not leaving over a contract dispute or they want to clear cap space. They could have done that. Like, JJ Watt has always been that model guy to say, hey, okay, I understand a $17 million cap hit is a big deal for a 32-year-old defensive end, defensive tackle, using me in multiple ways. So let's figure out how to keep me here in this place that I love, which I expressed on that farewell. And might I add this too? Yes, JJ Watt is aging. JJ Watt is 32, and he's played a lot of football, and maybe Houston is in a rebuild transition. But I need somebody to tell me who was better than JJ Watt on Houston Texans defense. What guy do you think you're going to build a future off of in that defense? What asset do you have defensively now that's going to make anybody believe that you can defend anybody when you were horrible with him and he was a shining light on that team? I completely disagree with the notion that if JJ Watt wanted to be in Houston, that he wouldn't be in Houston today.
Yeah, Marcus, it makes me think, too, of during the season when Watt challenged the rest of that Texans team to play better. Remember that rant that he went on, too? He's a great leader, which certainly is a part of all this. All right, we are just getting started on NFL Live. We're going to be all over this top story of the day, talking JJ Watt, why someone here thinks he could be the missing piece for one team's Super Bowl run. He can still play, as Marcus just said. Could a family reunion be in the works? Plus,
win. My goal is to get in there and take care of business.
To the deep throw by Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence is going to go to the end zone. Touchdown. What a laser. And spikes the ball, saying, take that.
You know you're going to get the other team's best. It really brings the best out of you.
Trevor Lawrence held his pro day today. Makes it feel that much more real that we'll finally get to see him in an NFL uniform, likely a Jaguars uniform. 17 teams showed up for this pro day, by the way. And hey, you never know what can happen. Lawrence, of course, getting surgery on his non-throwing shoulder that isn't expected to be serious. That's why he went ahead and did the pro day now. Tell me if you've heard this before. Trevor Lawrence can make all the throws. Well, check out all 90 of his passing touchdowns at Clemson. He's slinging it deep, short, to the left, middle, to the right. You can't knock the results either, right? 34-2 as a starter, which is the 5th best record in FBS history. But as we're just saying, Lawrence will have that surgery on the non-throwing shoulder before the draft. Here's what he had to say about the surgery today.
I think roughly, obviously, I got to still, continue to talk to the doctors and see how the rehab goes. But I think I can throw in 6 to 8 weeks after the surgery, start throwing again, and then looking at a 4 to 5 month full clearance. But obviously, I'll be able to do stuff before then. But just glad it's non-throwing shoulder, so it shouldn't be too bad. Just gonna rehab really hard and work hard to get back. But yeah, I'm just excited to get that fixed and kind of start that road to getting healthy.
Yeah, just furthers the toughness that Trevor Lawrence showed this past season playing with that injury. Either way, he's going to be just fine. Our Todd McShay has more on his pro day performance today.
Thanks, Laura. Listen, this was a formality. We all know it. He's going to be the #1 overall pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if you didn't believe it coming into today, just watch the session with Urban Meyer standing right next to the head coach, Dabo Swinney, about 5 yards away from the snap point of every single snap in this throwing session. Trevor Lawrence did what Trevor Lawrence was expected to do. He came out with just one receiver that he's worked with throughout his career, 3 other guys that he hasn't had a lot of time working with, only 2 weeks to prepare, where typically you have 7 or 8 weeks to prepare for these pro days because of the shoulder surgery that he's having on the non-throwing shoulder, the left shoulder. So it was kind of rushed. He decided to do it because Urban Meyer called him specifically and said, would you mind throwing in front of me and my coordinators? We haven't been able to see you throw live. And he did it today. And I thought out of 50 or so throws, he missed just one rolling to his left. Outside of that, he was right on the money with great timing and anticipation. He did everything you would expect Trevor Lawrence to do here today.
It's that visual of Urban Meyer standing right next to Dabo Swinney as they watch Trevor Lawrence throw. Really interesting stuff. And Tim, Todd mentioned that about Urban Meyer asking Trevor Lawrence to throw. That's a little unique, right?
Oh, that's really unique. Hey, we're going to move your pro day up 5 weeks, and would you mind throwing because we've got the #1 overall pick? Like, yeah, of course that is not standard. But I do think it's interesting from the standpoint of it's the head coach of the team that's got, the first choice in this draft, and the reaction to it by the quarterback that is expected to go to that franchise with that pick, that he says, yeah, sure. I've only trained with Jordan Palmer for 2 weeks now. I was planning on trading with him for at least 7 weeks before my pro day, but I'll go ahead and move it up and throw it to a couple, throw the ball around to a couple guys that I haven't really worked with. So I think it says a lot about the perspective of Trevor Lawrence. I think it maybe gives a little bit of insight in terms of, where Jacksonville stands on it, and certainly where Urban Meyer, stands on it. So yeah, this was unique. These are formalities, especially for guys like Lawrence. But that is a unique situation.
I'm glad Todd McShay told us who it was. I thought it was Sunshine from Remember the Titans or Fabio standing up there with them long locks like that. We knew Trevor Lawrence's performance was going to be tremendous. It's the natural talent that everybody gravitated to anyway. When we saw him a couple years ago in the national championship, 6'6", big arm, standing in the pocket, performing as a freshman like that against a Nick Saban defense in the national championship. We pegged Trevor Lawrence the #1 draft pick 2 years ago in this class, and he did not do anything to disappoint. He's going to have a successful NFL career based on the traits that we've seen guys have. He's highly rated, like a guy like Andrew Luck that's come out. But the question that I have is, like, after Trevor Lawrence, you have a tier of other guys, and you think about these guys and their traits and characteristics and the things that they will present to NFL teams. But seeing him throw on a whim, I think Tim makes a great point. very unconventional. To get a call and say, hey, we need you to do the biggest job interview of your life, and I know it's bad timing, and I know you didn't plan on doing it, but come out and do it. And then to have a performance like that, we saw how excited. Every time Todd McShay gets excited, I know something is coming that happened really good, either in a pro day or the combine. And what Trevor Lawrence did today is exactly what everybody expects him to do going forward. And that is why people are leaning franchises on this kid and saying that we can actually get to start winning with Trevor Lawrence being our starting quarterback.
Yeah, Todd McShay, hard to impress. Todd said the other day with his latest mock draft that it's Trevor Lawrence, and then there's a big gap before you get to who he has second coming off the board from a quarterback standpoint, which would be Zach Wilson. Field, I want to ask you something before I ask you what we were supposed to ask you here. I'm just curious your reaction. Why did Urban Meyer want Trevor Lawrence to throw? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, Laura, it's one thing to have had the opportunity to watch the player on tape throughout his college career, and Urban may well have been in attendance at a couple of Trevor's games during his role as an analyst for Fox over the past few seasons. But there's something to be said for that granular scouting opportunity when you're there just feet away. I can speak to it having been at the Senior Bowl just a couple of weeks ago, and the appreciation you get for players when you're just feet away from them on the field. And if you're the Jaguars, there is no stone that's going to be left unturned in every evaluation, including that of Trevor Lawrence. But, you know, Laura, of course he's going to be the first overall pick. But if you're the Jags, like, this is a one-day obligation. You're flown on a private jet just a couple of hours away. You want to see Trevor. And if Trevor is willing to do that, then you're going to look at this as just one more reason why this is the most no-brainer of all no-brainer picks.
Yeah, so then that makes you say, why were there 17 other teams there? I mean, there's a lot of other teams there that are just kind of playing around here. Field, I'll let you go first there. Why was it important for them to even just have their presence at this pro day?
Yeah, so Laura, first of all, it's not like there's a lot of other things that these scouts can be doing right now, right? And you think about what's going to take place over the next couple of months leading to the draft. Scouts are going to have the opportunities to go to a few pro days, but there's no combine, there's no private workout, and this is not to the extreme. Or previous years, we've seen things that have been less extreme. A quarterback who's not quite on Trevor Lawrence's level, but teams still go to the top quarterback pro days to get a little bit of information from the school about other prospects. In this case, there was one Clemson wide receiver that teams get a close look at. And frankly, Laura, as I just mentioned, the Jaguars are going to leave no stone unturned. Other teams are going to do the same. This is all part of the due diligence during the scouting process, especially in a year that is so unconventional like 2021 will be.
Yeah, and when you think about it, too, there's no doubt most likely that Trevor Lawrence will be an instant contributor. He's going to play next season probably for the Jaguars. So maybe there's a little bit of that, too, where they want to really see this guy, especially the teams that would have to face him coming up. All right, we got a lot more to get to here on NFL Live. We're getting back to JJ Watt. He's now looking for a new home. Which team gives him the best chance at a Super Bowl? Stay tuned to find out why Marcus believes he may want to pass up on playing with his brother. Our top story today, JJ Watt moving on from the Texans after the two sides decided on him being released. Watt said today he's excited about a chance to go somewhere new, albeit very thankful to Texans fans for their kindness and support. You got to think he's looking for a ring even over money at this point. And according to ESPN.com's Bill Barnwell, JJ Watt is already a 100% lock for the Hall of Fame. Here you see why. He's one of just 3 players to ever win the Defensive Player of the Year award 3 times, along with Aaron Donald and Lawrence Taylor. Pretty great company there. Watt also one of 7 players to lead the league in sacks multiple times, doing so in 2015 and in 2012. And even Phil Yates said earlier on the show he is one of the greatest to ever wear this uniform. Deshaun Watson agrees with Field, saying, quote, "Salute to one of the greatest of all time, JJ Watt," in a tweet. "I appreciate you for all the work you put in, and more importantly, the person you are. Any team in the league will be better the day you put on their jersey. Love for my brother, more glory." Marcus, you already said this earlier. You think JJ Watt is a great player, even at the age of 32, and he's still got some juice defensively. So tell us specifically how you think he would help a team and their defense.
Well, he's multiple, Els, and JJ Watt still is playing at a high level. Even this year, it gets a little bit overshadowed by what's been going on with Houston and Deshaun Watson, obviously, but he was the catalyst on that defense still. Being the aging veteran and the guy that's been in those wars, he provided pass rush. You can move him down in line at the line of scrimmage and rush him from inside. He's really like a mold of what you would want a defensive lineman to be. Long arms. We know about the pass deflections and how effective he's been in that regard. Obviously, sacking the quarterback, being able to track guys down, like the super athleticism, the physical nature. He can rush using power. He can rush using moves. His hands are wonderful. So he needs to end up on a team where he can be complemented by somebody on the other side of the ball, where you can move him and create one-on-one situations for him. We saw Tampa just now in the Super Bowl use their guys in that way. JPP ended up in 3 techniques at times, rushing from the inside. He still has a lot of good football left in him. JJ Watt is chasing rings now. I don't think it's about his salary or trying to be the highest paid guy. It's about going and winning a championship and identifying some teams out there that he can help do that.
Yeah, look, I think you're right about chasing a championship. He's made over $100 million playing football. And so, it isn't about chasing money. Money will matter, but it's not, the only determining factor for him. Look, I think you're right when you say there's a lot of good football left in him. Now, we also have to realize he's a guy that's been available to play an entire season only twice in the last 5 years. So, he's a 32-year-old defensive lineman. It is a young man's game, and it definitely is when you're playing inside and when you're playing with your hand on the ground. And so I think that, that's a factor in this as well, is going somewhere where, the expectations, Marcus kind of used the term, there'll be other players that complement. Look, that's important as well, is getting opportunities because of the people that you're playing alongside. Maybe playing on a team that's playing with a lead. Things like that do make a difference for guys like JJ Watt. So, look, whether it's Green Bay or whether it's Pittsburgh or whether it's Kansas City, teams that expect to be good, the Tennessee Titans, playoff caliber teams seem like they would make sense because if he is chasing a ring, that helps. That's a good start.
Yeah, Tim threw out a few names there of teams that we could see Watt land. Field, throw some more in the mix here. Let's see what we think about where he might end up.
Yeah, let's cast a really wide net here for a second, Laura, and just note that he's a 31-team fit. And what I mean by that, and let's say you're a young team like the Jaguars is looking to build this thing back up from the bottom. Who's a better mentor to have around than JJ Watt? The answer is nobody. As Tim mentioned, you've got contending teams where J.J. Watt could be the missing puzzle piece for them. Heck, the Bucs could use even more defensive depth if J.J. Watt wants to play on what would likely be a team-friendly contract. I'll mention one team that I think is sort of a unique one that threads the needle, though. The Browns, who I think could use some more defensive reinforcements. They made the playoffs this past year. I know Patrick Mahomes got hurt in the game, but they lost to the Chiefs by just 5 points in the divisional round. And the Browns are equipped cap-wise to make J.J. Watt a multi-year offer at a pretty reasonable rate. So if J.J., for example, wanted to both play for a contender but also secure a multi-year deal, not at $17.5 million per year, but maybe closer to $10 or $11 million per year, the Browns could be an intriguing fit.
Yeah, the intriguing fit for me is Kansas City. One, because I watched the game in the Super Bowl, and they do need pass rush help. And like Tim mentioned after I was speaking, you have Chris Jones on that defensive line, Frank Clark that can rush the passer. Look, guys, I've been through this. I saw a player leave, and it wasn't under the same circumstances. It was more of a money situation. But I saw DeMarcus Ware leave and was opposite of Von Miller, and they won a Super Bowl. And J.J. Watt still has that ability to get to the quarterback, which teams will pay a premium for 1 year, or they'll figure out a way to get him structured into a system where he can be effective. We know what these games come down to. We all understand that when you get in the playoffs and you get in the deep runs, that's why Kansas City couple years ago went and signed Terrell Suggs, so he could just come in and be a specialist. JJ Watt at this point offers you more than Terrell Suggs would have when Kansas City signed him, and he was effective in that defense as well. So I see that as a spot, and based on what we watched happen in the Super Bowl, I would think that would be something Kansas City would explore, seeing what Tampa Bay was able to do in that game.
Yeah, for me, guys, I'm just looking at it and thinking, what's the team that probably has the best chance to win the Super Bowl? And it's probably Kansas City of all these teams that we're throwing out, so that one might be the most likely. All right, let's get to a story that we've been following this week. Earlier this week, the Jacksonville Jaguars announced that they had hired Chris Doyle to be in charge of their strength and conditioning. The Fritz Pollard Alliance champions diversity in the NFL. They released this statement just a little while ago. They said, at a time when the NFL has failed to solve its problem with racial hiring practices, it's simply unacceptable to welcome Chris Doyle into the ranks of NFL coaches. Doyle's departure from the University of Iowa reflected a tenure riddled with poor judgment and mistreatment of black players. His conduct should be as disqualifying for the NFL as it was for the University of Iowa. Urban Meyer's statement, quote, I've known Chris for close to 20 years, end quote, reflects the good old boy network. That is precisely the reason there is such a disparity in employment opportunities for black coaches. And just to clarify here, if you missed this story earlier in the week, when he was hired, it did, of course, surface that Doyle had been requested to leave the University of Iowa after some of his players came out and said that they had received racist remarks from him. So, Field, when you see this from the Fritz Pollard Alliance and the situation with Jacksonville, what comes to mind?
Laura, I don't think that Chris Doyle is going to end up losing his job from the Jacksonville Jaguars as the head of their sports performance. But what I do think that the Fritz Pollard Alliance is highlighting is that Urban Meyer justifying this hire by noting that he's known Chris Doyle for 20 years and saying that he vetted him is far from enough. I don't think that's anywhere close to appeasing the people that this should matter to. If you're a black player on the Jaguars right now, are you saying to yourself, you know what, coach has known him for 20 years. I'm good with that. You know who else has known Chris Doyle for 20 years? The guy he used to work for, Kirk Ferentz, longtime Iowa head coach who hired him about 22 years ago. So just saying that you vetted him and it's all good is not nearly enough. I think the Jaguars are going to have to be far more transparent about the process that led them to feel comfortable to make this hire. They owe it to not just the players, but the public as well. And really coaches, minority coaches all over the college and the NFL map who are craving opportunities and being bypassed by others who have significantly checkered histories.
Yeah, Phil, that's absolutely how it should be looked at surface level, but you know I'm going deeper. This is the example of what we talk about with systematic racism, systematic oppression. And by no means am I saying Urban Meyer is racist. I'm not calling Urban Meyer a racist. What I'm saying is when these issues arise and you see us as black analysts, as guys that's talking about this sport with the hiring of black head coaches and dealing with some of the issues that we've seen in the league, that the league has acknowledged is a problem as well. These are the things that come to mind. I'm just giving y'all a raw, unfiltered feeling that I have about watching this story and listening to the statement from the Fritz Pollard Alliance. The bottom line is this: why are black head coaches, why are black coaches in the NFL not getting jobs based on merit, and we will make an excuse for a guy that was paid to leave a university because of racism? What are we doing? That's what I was talking about, Els, yesterday when I was saying how tone deaf does Urban Meyer have to be to not understand the ramifications of bringing this guy into the fold in the time that we're living in right now. That is why it is so heated. That is why people are screaming about all of the things that transpire when we get these cycles of coaching hires and no black coaches are hired that seem to be qualified more than white coaches that are being hired. So this is another example example of what the fight has been. This is another example of what Colin Kaepernick was talking about. This is another example of why we always talk about having to do more to get into a position. The bottom line is this: when Urban Meyer, to that point, said, I've known him for 20 years, so let's forget about the stuff that happened. Let's not have a discourse or a conversation with any other guys on this team about how they would perceive this move being made. This is the perfect example of the frustration of the things that are going on. And the league, to their credit, to the league's credit, not ownership, not the 32 owners, not whoever it is, the league made a stance based on what players wanted to get out. And this is one of the issues that you must address. This is one of the issues why people fly off the handle when we get into these type of conversations. It's bad, it's tone deaf, and it's a slap in the face to everything we've been talking about with the league and hiring practices for the last 5 years.
Yeah, once again, Chris Doyle paid over $1 million to leave the University of Iowa, and this after many players came out with statements about how they received racist remarks from him.
I done got mad.
All right, we got more coming your way on NFL Live as we continue our conversations. Hey, Trevor Lawrence expected to be the first pick in this year's draft, but what about the other QBs? Keep it locked to find out why someone here thinks it's a mistake if Justin Fields isn't the second QB off the board.
It's a no-brainer that he's the number 1 overall pick.
Who's going to be the second quarterback in this draft?
If you want it, don't wait your turn. None of this is given. Everything is earned.
No matter the moment, I'm going to do whatever it takes to win.
The whole point of the game is to win the game and have fun.
This guy is electric.
My main goal is to win every game.
Touchdown, Cougars!
Keep the naysayers at a distance. Speak success into existence.
ESPN scouting partner Scouts Inc. gave Trevor Lawrence a prospect grade of 97 out of 100. You see him at his pro day today. That prospect grade ties Saquon Barkley for the highest of any player since 2016. Barkley and Lawrence also the only non-linemen to have a grade that high over the span. To find a higher grade than Lawrence and Barkley, you see it here. You have to go all the way back to Jadeveon Clowney with a 98 in 2014. And Tim, if you're a quarterback in this draft class, you're like, man, people aren't talking enough about me. All they're ever doing is talking about Trevor Lawrence. The reality is Lawrence is just that much more special than really a lot of quarterbacks that we've seen, right? And it's really not as much of a slight on the other guys.
Just born at the wrong time, Laura. That's what it boils down to. Look, yeah, he is. He's one of these guys that checks nearly every single box, does so many things well. And so the fact that we've separated Trevor Lawrence from the rest of these quarterbacks that many people expect will go in the first round really isn't a slight on them. The outlier is Trevor Lawrence. I mean, let's face it, like Justin Fields, look, he had to transfer to go play. Trey Lance played 1 game this past season. You know, Zach Wilson had some up and down performances. Mac Jones, kind of a one-hit wonder. And when you think about other quarterbacks that have gone in the first round, you know, you're talking about, you know, like Kyler Murray, is he tall enough? Who was Daniel Jones, you know, supporting cast? Was Josh Allen accurate enough at Wyoming? You know, all these different things. There's typically something that makes you be like, yeah, I love him. I think this guy's great, but this is kind of bothering me about the evaluation process with him. You know, with Trevor, there just isn't that. The production's been there, the off-the-field leadership's been there, the in-the-locker-room leadership's been there, and then the play's been outstanding. So I think it's just a matter of he's just been that good.
Yeah, Tim is absolutely right. Look, he separated himself. Nobody needed to separate Trevor Lawrence from the guys in this class. We've seen him, watched him, and understand his talent level and what he could potentially turn into on the next level. I think about the next 3, though. Zach Wilson, which McShay said was obviously a far cry under Trevor Lawrence, but then he had a degree of separation between Trey Lance and Justin Fields. And my question comes up all the time, and every time we get into this year, how much of the evaluation process do you put into competition? The guys that these guys are playing against. I know traits. I see them. I understand them. I know Patrick Mahomes went to Texas Tech and the Big 12 didn't play defense, and you couldn't really judge a lot on that, but they drafted traits. They drafted things, the wow factor. So I'm wondering, between Zach Wilson and Trey Lance and Justin Fields, where is that degree of separation based on what those guys have done in college? I know for me, just old school football, I would love to see guys compete against the type of competition that they'll play on the next level. Does that mean they won't be good in the league? No. But when that opportunity presents itself, I like to make a judgment based on that.
So much of it's situational. Which team would have a chance to develop a guy? You saw Jordan Love get maybe a little bump based off of some Patrick Mahomes comparisons last year, but they knew they'd have time there. I think that's so key when you look at all these guys that are beyond Trevor Lawrence. All right, it was just over a year ago. The Texans had a 24-0 lead over the Chiefs in the playoffs. Since then, however, everything has gone downhill. Where do they go from here? We discuss that next here on How Did We Get Here with the Texans? So much has happened in just the past 2 months. Ready for a fresh start, Deshaun Watson spoke with owner Cal McNair at the start of the offseason to discuss the GM search. And Watson asked for the team to at least meet with certain candidates, but that wasn't the case. He learned via social media that Nick Caserio had gotten the job for GM, and then that was the last straw for Watson. He requested a trade on January 28th. Then a day later, the new coach, David Culley, introduced as Caserio said, "We have zero interest in trading the quarterback." Now, fast forward to just 2 days ago, President Jamie Roots resigns after 20 years with the team, after several key staffers were also fired the previous week. And then today, the news about JJ Watt. The Texans agreed to mutually part ways after 10 seasons in which he endeared himself greatly to the city of Houston. Our Adam Schefter spoke with Texans owner Cal McNair on criticism of Texans executive Jack Easterby, whose role, according to his official bio, is to manage all football operations and direct to overall culture of the organization. And McNair said this about Easterby, quote, "It's not the right time to talk about the front office. It's all about JJ and honoring him today. Our collective actions and united mission is winning championships and creating memories." All right, so here's the thing, Marcus. Today is about JJ Watt, right, and honoring him. But still, there are so many layers of dysfunction here, it seems. What's your reaction to seeing all of this and hearing what McNair is saying?
Well, first of all, I don't want Cal McNair saying it's a bunch of misinformation. The face of your franchise wants to leave. So there's some information he has that makes him want to depart that we all might not know about. And then the second thing is, when you look at the moves that have been made, not only Bill O'Brien trading away DeAndre Hopkins, you look at the situations that arise with the Houston Texans from a football standpoint, and that's enough to know that you need to transition and get people in there that can help this thing get in the right direction. And then too, like, I can't fathom, okay, a relationship being strong between an owner, a general manager, a head coach or whoever it may be, and you have the face of your franchise wanting to be involved in at least conversation. Nobody is saying any quarterback, any player should be the final say in any decision. But the fact that you've tied yourself together and the fact that you have a guy that's generational, if the conversation can't be about what the direction is and who we think is in line with that direction, that's a serious issue for any organization. Every quarterback doesn't get that privilege because you have to prove yourself over time that you're willing to go out and not only perform at a high level, but also raise the level of play with the guys that's around you. So for Deshaun Watson to feel disenfranchised by the Houston Texans is the craziest thing in the world to me, because it would have been so much easier to involve him in the discussions and be done with all of this and know the direction that this franchise wanted to go.
Yeah, so Tim, we know that Deshaun Watson is disgruntled, but you really haven't heard from other players that are under contract, other guys that, would be in that locker room next season. If you're a player under contract and you're thinking about being in that locker room playing for this team with everything that's going on, where's your head at right now?
Well, we haven't heard from them because they don't have the same type of juice. They want to keep their job, whether it's with the Texans or anyone else. That's the vast majority of NFL locker rooms are made up of guys like that. But what are you thinking? Look, you're not happy about being in a situation where it just doesn't look like your team's going to enjoy much success, and that there's going to be a fair amount of turmoil and change. And so that's never fun to be part of as a player, just like losing is not fun to be a part of. So if you're a player, you're not excited about this. There's part of me that also, I feel like we need to take a step back a little bit and realize, the Texans are going through this now, but we see this all the time. The Dolphins went through it. Jeff Ireland was the leader there. The Jets have gone through it with Mike McCagnon and John Idzik. The Raiders went through it with Hugh Jackson and Reggie McKenzie. This happens all the time. It's been a quick fall from grace, but we see it all the time in the NFL.
Laura, I know we're about to wrap up here, so I'll leave with this thought and this is not about Nick Caserio and David Culley, the new GM and head coach. Accountability is something that teams expect out of players. Where's the accountability specifically from Jack Easterby and Cal McNair? You guys have been largely operating in the shadows as your organization publicly starting to crumble.
Yeah, they had a chance to say something about Deshaun today and